So today we're going to talk about the stewardship campaign that we're in the midst of right now. And if you can put the first slide up. Are we ready for the first? Are you guys okay? Are we ready for the first slide? There we go. So the theme of the stewardship campaign this year is Rooted in Love, which is a beautiful theme. And if later on you want to go look at this, the figures I'm going to use were made by the Stewardship Committee, and they're gorgeous. And you can go to that link up there that's the church website, OUUC.org, and then the Give tab, and then the Stewardship tab, and read these. They have even more figures. They have a ton of information. It's really helpful if you find something you want to think about later. And you can always ask us questions, anybody on the board, and our names are also on the website with our pictures, so we can't hide. So I think that's everything I wanted to say for that. And I call this an aspirational budget, which the numbers people are cranky about. But I think one of the things that's tricky in church ministry at any time is the fact that this is a place we come to hoping that we will get our souls refreshed and have community and have all these kind of intangible results. And then we also have to talk about money. And I know there is at least one person sitting here going, I hate talking about money at church. Church should just be about wonderful things. And so I'm just acknowledging that that's something that's going to happen during this presentation, and acknowledge that the board has actually spent a long time trying to keep in mind kind of our vision for the future, as well as making sure the toilets still work. And that's kind of what we're tasked with as the board, and is what we're tasked with because actually you are our bosses on the board, so the whole congregation is tasked with making sure that the church is safe and that we have heat when we need it and the bathrooms work. And so that's something we have to consider, even though it would be much more fun to pretend like it just happened miraculously. So I'm going to be talking about how they did the stewardship drive, and then a little bit of how we ended up with the budget that we presented as part of the stewardship drive. So the stewardship drive had 11 gather and grow guide sessions, and those were sessions I'm sure many of you went to. And that was, again, what we're trying for, the visioning, the part of what is working really well, what feeds my soul, what do I wish doesn't happen, and what do I wish would happen. So it's how we start, and also how we start to plan for the future. And so those stewardship sessions have gone on, I think, the last couple of years, and they've been great because we're all thinking together, not just what's happening today, but what could happen tomorrow. And so that's an important part of budgeting, as much as it doesn't seem apparent that it is. And so they had 11 of those gather, grow, and guide sessions. They had about 130 people. And one of the things they did at those sessions was pass out note cards that had people answer, how does OUUC nurture me? And then another note card, how do I nurture our OUUC? And for those of you that don't know about word clouds, there's this nice little program that you can put all the words somebody gives you. So they take all the cards, the data people compile, all the words that are community or related to community, all the words that are stewardship or related to stewardship. And then you feed them into this program, and on the next slide you can see a word cloud that was generated with how does OUUC nurture me? The bigger the word is, the more people included that word. So word clouds are a really great visual aid to understand what people thought were important. And you can see in the how does OUUC nurture me, the biggest word is community. OUUC is present in both of these, which I find interesting and can't really interpret, but it's good. And you can see some of the other big words about how OUUC nurtures us is together and communities, opportunities, value, justice, social, place, and grow. And there's even a little Reverend Mary down there. So this is how people feel nurtured by OUUC. And then the next slide is how do I nurture OUUC, which again has OUUC is a big word that I can't interpret. But you can see community support, time, others, and financial is down there, the choir, service, and helping. So those are all the ways that we feel we can give back to OUUC. So again, I want you to just think as we go along about the idea that what we're trying to do is have this standing on the balcony vision. If we could decide what OUUC was like in 5 or 10 years, what would that look like? Well, we also have this vision of one of our heaters is failing, and that's the kind of dynamic that always happens in a church budget. And I will tell you that I'm going to give you the easy things to talk about, and Jeff Goltz, who's the treasurer of the board, thank goodness, is going to give us the kind of more nuts and bolts part of the discussion. So the way that we develop this budget, and it's the same process every year, things are a little bit different with every stewardship campaign, but the way that this year was, in January and a little bit in February, they had these gather, grow, and guide sessions where congregants got to talk about what they wanted to see and what they thought was great and what they wished was different. And at the same time, in a very great demonstration of how it's nuts and bolts as well as visioning, the minister and the staff are talking about how much money do we need to run this program. So the minister and the staff are developing the budget while we're having these wonderful large talks about what things could be awesome. And then in February, the proposed budget is shared with the board for discussion. And so the board talks about it, makes sure that we think everything they asked for is wonderful. I'm sure we made some suggestions because we can't not do that. And then we set a stewardship pledge goal. And in this case, the stewardship pledge goal for this year is $593,400 and 273 pledge units. So my wife and I are one pledge unit. So that's how they count pledge units. And so we're looking at both not only the money, because money can vary, but how many people feel as if OUUC is important enough to pledge their financial resources to. I keep wanting to say next slide and then realize I'm saying it to myself. Okay. And then the pledge drive runs from February to the end of March, and you'll notice that today is March 16th or 15th, whatever it is. So you still have a couple weeks. Should you feel so motivated to increase your pledge or you haven't gotten around to it, there is still plenty of time and plenty of gratitude to absorb for that. So in April, we'll look at the pledges that we get through the stewardship campaign, look at other potential available funds that I'll talk about in a few minutes, and then the board and Reverend Mary work together to make the adjustments that we have to make to fit within our budget. In May, we approve the proposed budget at the board meeting and share it a couple weeks before the congregational meeting so that you have time to read it and look over it if you are excited about doing that. And then there's going to be an after-church forum on June 1st to review the proposed budget, talk about how it was made, and answer any questions you have. And then we'll vote on the budget at the annual congregational meeting on June 8th. So the board has been trying, because this is a hard thing for organizations to do, it's much easier to talk about spending $400 to replace, I don't know why I'm toilet fixated today, but to replace to replace a couple toilets than it is to talk about how can we meet the needs of our community. And so the board has really been working the last couple of years to move forward with that and to spend time talking about how we line our goals up as Unitarians with how we spend our money. And so there are a couple slides that talk about this. So this is, I think Reverend Mary asked us for what board goals we would send, and this is the list we ended up with. Embodying our values is an obvious one. You know, we are here for a reason and for the kind of organization it is, so we want to spend our money on things that are important to us. One of the ways we do that is prioritizing people. So we pay our staff fairly, and we try to make sure that we can add to staff so that we're not burning our great staff out because they do a ton of work. And we also adjust staff health benefits so that they're just and equitable. It's a value that we all, I hope, have, that it is not fair to us, for us to have health insurance and not to provide it for our employees. So that's a value that we share. We also have talked this year about increasing congregational engagement, and that includes funding 2 services. After the election happened, we had an idea that there might be people that were looking for community and safety. And so we decided then to go ahead and start 2 services in January. If you've been coming here, you know how well attended those services have been. So that's been a great thing. We are in this budget also planning to continue to fund 2 services. There's also a lot of research and information about the fact that people feel more engaged if they can sit in here. And if we have to send people into overflow out in the hall, that doesn't give them the same engagement with the congregation that we're hoping for. So 2 services is very valuable for us. This is my favorite new thing in the budget, so I'll probably talk about it a couple times, and that is to create a new part-time staff position to support engagement. And I know some of you probably remember before the pandemic, we had a staff person that did that. And she moved at the same time, or relatively around the same time the pandemic happened, and we diverted all of the money that we had set aside to pay for her position to pay for tech. So that was how we were able, I think the first week we were at home, we were able to have church through Zoom. We were able to have tech staff and have technical equipment so that we could come into your homes when nobody could come here. So that meant, of course, we're using that money in a different way, so we need to re-add it to the budget. We also wanted to cover operating costs through pledges and other regular sources without using one-time funds. We're trying to avoid having a deficit budget. And we're also focusing on long-range planning, which I said is something that's we're trying to really make ourselves do. And that's to maintain and improve our facility. And I had not noticed before today that there's an automatic door opener, which arose directly out of a congregant coming to us and saying, you know, I can't get in unless there's somebody to help open the heavy door, and that's not always true, and I think it would serve a lot of people. And so we thought about it, we talked about it, we figured out how to pay for it, and now there's a button to push for people that have walkers and wheelchairs or babies or whatever is the reason it's hard for you to pull open those heavy doors. So that's part of long-range planning. We also are hoping to establish a healthy reserve fund using our capital campaigns and other one-time fundraising efforts as needed. This is a little reminder that the capital campaign, the final pledge that you promised, if you pledged to it, is due soon because we're coming to the end of that, so please make sure you do that. And again, that's why we have heat right now, because we were able to put heat in the building, so. Okay. And so these were the board goals that we had, and this is what ended up being in the proposed budget. So we adjusted the staff health benefits to be just and equitable. We are giving and this is the proposed budget. This is not the adopted budget. So this is the one that we're asking for pledges based on. So 2.5% cost of living increase for staff, adding a quarter-time member engagement specialist. And if you're not sure what that wording means, an engagement specialist is, you've noticed we're a large church. We even have 2 services. And what that means is very few people know everybody anymore. That's something that can only happen in a small church, really. A member engagement person can attend all of the many new member ministry classes. Reverend Mary and Sarah, I think, are doing the 2nd or 3rd one in a row right now, the 3rd one in a row. We have a lot of new people. We have a lot of people that are coming to us so that they can be comforted and be in a community they feel safe when the world doesn't feel very safe. And so this new member engagement person can meet with new members, find out what they love, and help them to meet and contact people that will really make them feel like this is a home. You know, if somebody's a gardener, they may not ever want to talk in public, but they may be completely willing to come and help clean up the grounds, or maybe even serve on the Buildings and Grounds Committee eventually. So it's very helpful to have one staff member with a little time to just focus on that. And also it gives somebody, Reverend Mary and Reverend Sarah, who do these big programs, it gives them somebody to say, you know, I noticed that so-and-so shows up every time we offer special fiddle music or whatever the example is. Maybe that's a way that we could meet their needs more. So that's what the member engagement specialist will do, and that's my favorite thing, because I think we were I think Bonnie was the member engagement specialist, and I think she talked to us and then left right after we got here, which presumably was not on purpose. But so I really found that valuable when we first got here, and I'm hoping that we can add that and take the burden off our staff. Okay, and we also have increased hours, which if you know anything about staffing, you know means they get increased health benefits, for 2 existing part-time staff to allow them to provide more administrative support and more tech support from the office, because that seems to work better. So we're also doing that. And also, again, to reduce pressure on the people that are doing the giant programs like Reverend Mary and Reverend Sarah. The other things we're including are we're funding landscape improvements, including drought-tolerant plants and mulch. And I know a bunch of you that were not excited about budget stuff are excited about drought-tolerant plants and mulch. So this is your moment to be excited. We are hoping to offer 2 Sunday morning services beyond June. We are hoping to, the UUA tells us how much the Unitarian Universalist Association, who's our big umbrella group, and they actually have helped us. We had a great retreat that was led by a UUA minister and a staff member just a couple weeks ago. So we're hoping to be able to pay them fully what we should owe them, which we have not been doing in the last couple of years. We pay them some, we just don't pay them the total amount. And we all know everything is more expensive. So we're hoping to help cover the operating expenses that will go up because of inflation. And we all know that from just buying groceries. So then this slide is what does not make it into the proposed budget. We try really hard to be a little bit practical, even though we want it to be a vision of what the church can be, but we also are not, you don't become a board member by not being fairly grounded in reality. So what's not included in the proposed budget is that the 2.5% increase does not make our salaries equal to what's expected by the UUA. The UUA sets staff salaries by tying it into the cost of living at the place where the church is. So Olympia cost of living puts us in a certain staff salary range, and we are not yet at that range for the minister in particular. And so we're not doing that yet. That is something that we're getting to. We are trying to make that happen over the next couple years. There are no merit or longevity salary increases. We are very lucky. We have a minister that's been here for 5 years, and Sarah, who's been here for forever, as far as I can tell. And that is a gift to us. You know, that's a huge thing that we have, and it would be lovely if we could reward them for being here so long, but that's not in our budget right now. And for the second time, maybe, I think we have a separate budget for major capital projects. And so that's separate from what we're talking about today. And then this graph, which I had to have John Cox explain to me because it's amazing and also terrifying, is actually really helpful. And so this is a flow diagram. And so on the left side, it starts off with where the money comes in. And so you can see on the left side, and it's kind of the first third, that's the gray purple slab. The proposed budget is the long gray bar that is on the top. So that's the budget we've been talking about already. There are additional sources of revenue that are listed in tiny print on the bottom, and you can go look this graph up if you'd like to. It's also on the website. And that includes, I should have made notes, that includes what we bring in through the book sale, which is a wonderful service that Susan Dodson does. She does online book sales and contributes the money. And that also includes,
interest income.
Thank you. Thank you, Sally.
Share the plate offering, interest.
Let's wait for a microphone.
Interest income, share the plate offering,
Auction.
and the auction. So that's where all that other income feeds in. And then you can see at the blue line, that's our overall budget, which includes all the pledges as well as all those smaller sources of income. And that's about $685,000. And then in the middle, you can see how it, oh, bless your heart. In the middle, you can see how it flows out. And also thank Sharon for being the head of stewardship. Sharon and Jen Sable. So the middle part, you can see the blue part, that's how it starts to flow out. And if you look down on the biggest red block, that's personnel, which is about $529,000. And that sounds like a lot. I have a core memory about how important personnel are. And that is when I was a new mother at another church, I remember crying in the nursery once because it was the third Sunday in a row I had gotten all my kids up and gotten everybody out to go to church, and I ended up working in the church nursery because none of the volunteers showed up. And I remember sitting thinking, I could have worn comfortable clothes and taken care of just one child if I had stayed at home. And so that, to me, staff just is a gift because it enables us to sit here and listen to the wonderful sermon we had today. We had a beautiful sermon about letting the light in and throwing pots. And we got to meditate and sit and be calm, and that was because there were nursery caregivers doing work. Reverend Sarah has a program that runs so that there's story time for children. Every time, as far as I can tell, we're in this space, there is a staff member doing some kind of program. And we have set the church up that way on purpose. We are lucky to have wonderful staff. And so the fact that personnel is the biggest part of our budget is a great thing to me. So the salary and staff wages is about $386,000. And then on the right side, those smaller expense categories are the normal things: life insurance, payroll taxes, professional expenses, retirement benefits, and the medical and dental plan. And again, while this is a nuts and bolts thing, remember that it is also how we live our values. We're providing our staff with health insurance. We're providing our staff with retirement benefits because that's how you should treat other people. And then if you look at the top, the second biggest ribbon is in the middle, and that's resource ministry. That's about $95,000. And that includes building and grounds maintenance, for those of you that were happy about the mulch a few minutes ago, and cleaning and office things, and this is the category that has our Unitarian Universalist Association dues in it. And that also counts for our tech budget and fees and bookkeeping and insurance. And then the top one, there are a bunch of smaller categories. They include boards and leadership, spiritual life, faith development, community life, and faith in action. And I know I see some of you that are involved in some of those committees and teams, and that's where that money comes from. And you can see the expenses on the side. We have a budget for leadership development, which means we can have training. We have a budget for fundraising, which enables us to print the things like this that Sharon just brought in for us. Music is included in this, which is crucially important to almost everyone in our church. And worship arts has a budget from this, as does family ministries, adult ed, and there's a community life budget. So that is where the money comes in and how it goes out and what we choose to spend it on. And I am delighted to introduce or let you see Jeff again. And Jeff is going to come up and do the rest of the slides that have actual more numbers.
So as Susan mentioned, I'm Jeff Goltz. I'm in my third year as treasurer and just now learning how to do it, I think. So I'm here to talk about some other aspects of the budget. These are some examples of other sources of income we have and how we're predicting those for so far for the proposed budget. You'll notice that we had share the plate, the two services, increased attendance. Logically, it leads to increased share of the plate. And so we concluded in the proposed budget, moving it up from 33,000 to 35,000. And remember, that's split 50-50, so our budget gets 50% of that. But since we did the proposed budget, we've been kind of some people have been redoing the numbers, and we probably in the final budget bump that up to almost 40, maybe $39,000 or $40,000. So that's another source of income. In the big picture of things, it's not a big percentage of the income, but trust me, when you get down to crunch time in the budget, an extra couple $1,000s can make a big difference. Auction has been, for the past several years, it's been terrifically successful. So we decided to up the anticipated revenue from that from 22 to 24,000. That's what it's been the last couple of years. We've had some very good large contributions and numerous contributions to the endowment. So we have, once the endowment hit 500,000, or 400,000, I should say, we started to take draws from the endowment pursuant to a formula. And for the current fiscal year, the endowment draw is $17,094 that would go into the operating budget. The year before that, it was about $16,000. The endowment now is about $700,000. So that would allow the endowment draw of about $27,500. We'll have to wait and see because we still have to do the calculations for this quarter. And some of you may be thinking, oh my gosh, those are our investment funds. Look what happened to the stock market. Are we in trouble? The answer is no, because the formula is based on the average balance in the endowment over the previous 12 quarters. So although our endowment balance may go down for this quarter because of the stock market fall or plunge, whatever you want to call it, we will still probably be able to draw $27,500 for it. So, and I hope that continues to go up over time, as it should. Over the last 20 years, the Unitarian Universalist Common Endowment Fund has earned between 6 and 7% on average over the years. And we draw 4.5% of the average over the 12 quarters. So even if we got no new contributions, if those trends continue, we would be able to increase our draw over time. And interest income, we have a bunch of reserves. We have a capital reserve, for example. We have an operating reserve. So we've been investing that money in certificates of deposit, either at Twin Star or we opened up an account at OB Credit Union because OB Credit Union gives better interest rates for some CDs. And this past year, we budgeted, or current fiscal year, we budgeted $4,000. We're probably going to make $10,000 in investments this year. But we proposed budgeting $6,000 for the next year. And that's because, one, interest rates are going down. And two, we've got some capital projects coming up. So the money that's sitting in the capital reserve right now is going to be, spent on various projects. So we won't have as much to invest over time.
Like what?
I'm sorry.
Projects like?
Oh, well, there's a proposal and that's going to be part of the capital budget. That's going to be brought to the congregation as well in June, or be publicized sometime in April or May. The Front Steps projects. We've had some other ones like a new door system, the new automatic door, for example. We replaced the gutters. That was a capital project. We did that sidewalk out here, capital project. We did some stuff out on the parking lot. And there's the reserve study that was done about 3 years ago has a whole list of projects coming up. Stuff wears out. And at some point, we're going to have to do the roof, the skylights. Yeah. So, okay. So here.
Can you go back one slide, because I think there's, did you talk about rental income?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So we've always had, you know, a little bit of rental income. We haven't budgeted for it. And so the board created a rental income task force. And I think I saw Liz here, she's on it with me, Lee Doyle, and several other people. And so we studied what other churches are doing to try to rent out space. There's a lot of problems with it. As a matter of fact, I attended a webinar one time of church treasurers. And the big message was, Unitarians never charge enough. So you say, well, we'll rent out the sanctuary for $100. Well, we have to pay to clean it up. We've got to pay to heat it. You know, there's wear and tear. So we have to get the rental rates right, and we have to publicize it. But in order to get into this, we don't want to have too big of a burden on staff, because frankly, they're stretched. So we're trying to creep into it gently, and for the first year, we're hoping to get $2,000, and maybe that will go up over time, but we've got to get the rental rates right. So sometimes people say, oh, why don't we just rent this thing out? We've got all this space. Well, there's a lot of expenses in that, and so I think we have to be careful to go into it. I talked to one church administrator of a large church in the state of Washington, and he was just saying, yeah, we've got this big program, we've got a website, we've got a brochure. He said, but you know, we rent a classroom. He said, and the church administrator, I spent 4 hours to rent a classroom for $75, you know, because I'm dealing with the lease, I'm dealing with the agreement, I'm dealing with questions and all that stuff. And that's not counting cleaning up. So it's not a solution to a financial problem. But thanks for bringing this. Okay, so in recent, what about reserves? We have used in recent years some one-time money, and to fill the gap between expenses and revenues. And as you recall, we had COVID, people stopped coming to church, our expenses went up, the economy was all uncertain, people's contributions leveled off. Luckily, the federal government came through with the PPP program, Paycheck Protection Program, so we got some money to help out with salaries for that freed up some other money. So we were able to get through. That program ended, and we still have this gap. So we did use some one-time funds. We had remember George Lanning, he generously gave the church a lot of money, and we used a number of that money to bridge the gap between expenses and revenues. Now, in the last fiscal year, we used $33,455 of reserves, one-time money. You realize that that doesn't go on forever. You can't do it. This year, we've budgeted $17,043. I hope that, and I think we hope, and Susan mentioned this in the board goals, that we get that down to zero. Now, that might not happen this time, but I hope that we can get it down to something under $17,043. We still have some legacy funds left over, but there's other competing demands for those. You know, those can be used for capital projects. They can be used for other things. So we have to treat those, it's not free money. Here's some reserve balances. The capital campaign fund restricted to capital. This is from the capital campaign that we started a couple years ago. And it's still, as Susan mentioned, you have until the end of December to finish your pledge, and check your statements, because it'll say how much is still owing. We still have, I think, like $20,000 that's not collected. So there's still a ways to go to get that. But we have $70,000 for that. We have a building major maintenance fund that has been fed by a variety of sources over time. That's now almost $12,000. And then we have a legacy gifts balance. These are, in general, bequests or unrestricted gifts to the church. So that's quite a bit. All that money, as I say, is invested in CDs. We're earning interest on it in the 3.5 to 4.5% range. But that's going to start to disappear more. I mean, if we had to do the roof, which we thankfully don't have to quite yet, but that's going to be a major project. Skylights is going to be a fairly major project. You know, we've already done some projects, as we said. The front stairway, that's probably something that's going to have to be fixed over the next year as well. This is a chart that you saw in the stewardship materials, and it's two things about it. One, it is just so interesting and so well done, but and it shows that you separate it into quartiles, and it shows that basically, if I can find mine here, we're getting 25% of the budget from 16 people, 16 pledging units. Now, that's great because it's so generous. It shows a lot of generosity. But it's also a little bit anxiety producing because a church should not rely on that few people for so much money. Ideally, this chart would be not so exponential, to use a mathematical term, but it'd be more of a straight line going up, I think. And so we just have to be cognizant of that and hope that in stewardship, people progress. People are able to increase their pledge, move from one quartile to the next, and we don't over-rely on so few people. So this is sort of where we are on the stewardship drive. And I say sort of because I talked to Sharon just a little while ago. And so the numbers are not quite right anymore. Of course they aren't. And again, Sharon and Jen coordinating this, it is both a rewarding job and a thankless job. And I think we really owe them, so thank them frequently and often because we want them to be happy with what they do, so perhaps they can do it next year. The stewardship pledge goal was 593,400 with 273 pledgers. And as of last Friday, we had 413,000 plus in. So we do have a ways to go. Sharon tells me that just this morning, they got a number of other pledges and some generous, some fairly large ones. So that number is going up. Recall that if you do recall, the chart, the budget calls for pledge revenue of 576,000. That's obviously down from 593. And the reason for that is we assume for budget purposes that there'll be a drop-off of approximately 3%. Now, years ago, the drop-off was less than that. A couple years ago, the drop-off was more than that. We really have to try, we assume some people just can't make their pledge. They just can't do it. Some people move away, and because things happen. So we assume a 3% drop-off. And we may not reach that pledge goal. And I say may not because I have a personal recollection of pledge drives ever since 2000, when it was the first time I worked on a pledge drive. We have never made a pledge goal. I'm pretty sure we have never made it. That always happens. But you try to, have an aspirational goal and strive for it, and then you try to adjust if you don't do it. But we want to make that gap, shortfall, as small as we can. Now, the stewardship committee did make a very rough estimate of where they think we might end up. And I think this is a little bit of a low estimate, but it's $514,000. Now, that would be a shortfall of about $79,000. Now, that's really big. I think it'll be less than that. But there's things that we can do. We can recall that we talked about some of these other sources of income. We might be able to adjust those up. We always go through and scrub expenses, and there might be some expenses that we could pare back some. But in any event, we do have a ways to go. So as Susan said, if you've already made your pledge, please reconsider, and you can always up it. If you haven't pledged, please get your pledge in soon, and we'll try to get that gap as low as we can. I'll give you one example. UUA dues. Susan mentioned that we want to pay full freight on UUA dues. That'd be like $25,000 in that neighborhood. This past year, we paid $10,000, and that was up from $5,000 the year before. But how many people really want to say, oh, let's just not pay UUA dues? You want to pay as much as you can. So we're hoping that we can get that up as high as we possibly can. But things like that give us a little bit of wiggle room, but I hope that we don't have to take advantage of it too much. So we have a big gap, and you say, oh my gosh, that's kind of scary. But remember where we were a few years ago. Okay, remember? 3 or 4 years ago, we were paying $40,000 a year in debt service. We aren't paying that anymore. 4 years ago, our endowment was not meeting, had not met the threshold that would allow us to draw from the endowment fund. This coming year, we're going to get $20-some thousand out of the endowment fund. 4 years ago, we didn't have a legacy giving program, and we do now. And a number of people, including some here in this room, have committed in their estate plans to include OUUC, which, as you know, we've gotten some great bequests in the past few years that have helped us through these budget times. So I think that even though, like every year, meeting the stewardship goal is going to be a challenge, the long-term prognosis for the financial health of the congregation, I think, is really very good. And I think that we can go to our aspirational budget, do the best we can, get as close as we can, and then we'll keep on going year after year. So with Sharon's and Jen's help. Any other questions about that? I think that's the last slide. Yeah.
I recently learned about the magic of qualified charitable deductions.
Yeah.
And I wonder, are we educating people like me who systematically to improve that? Because it's...
Yeah, but my wife and I, that's how we make our contribution every year. We make it out of what it is when you reach a certain age, you can make a qualified charitable distribution out of your IRA. And Sharon's going to answer that question.
Well, I just had a question in the comments about it, and there's a link at the bottom of the stewardship letter. If you don't have yours anymore, we've got a box of them out there. But it's on the OUUC website. There's a link under giving for ways to give, and it gives the specific logistics. And Zoe, asked us to put that in the letter and also reminded us that one of the key things you have to do is make sure that your financial provider puts your name on it when they send it to the church, and that you let the church know it's coming. That's the one glitch people have had, is that sometimes the church gets a check from Schwab or something and it doesn't have a name. So just kind of follow up with the church office and make sure it's been credited to you, but that's a great way to give. And there are details on the website.
Yeah, thanks, Frank, for that, because that effectively allows you to give it to avoid taxes on that. So that's good. Any other questions?
Or online.
Online?
Nothing online just yet.
Susan, back to you.
Sure.
Can I have the microphone just a second? I want to clarify something. On one of the slides, we talked about increasing 2 staff members' hours up to the point where right now they're not receiving benefits. They're not getting health benefits. So that, I don't know if you remember that, I did that slide, so that's how come I remember. It says, and related benefits. So it's increasing their hours so that we can begin to pay them their health insurance and other benefits. So that's important. Living our values.
Yeah. Okay, that's what we have. Stay tuned. Stewardship, they're doing such a fantastic job. Thank them every time you see them, because that means you get to sit here while somebody else is cleaning the kitchen or watching your babies or whatever. But thank you so much. This is a great place, and I think this year it's going to be very important for all of us to have a safe place that is welcoming to everyone, because that might become less common in the outside world. And also a little tiny thing that Sarah's been working with a committee to get us OUUC t-shirts to wear to some of these outside of the church events and show our presence, which also helps bring people here and know that there's a safe place that they can come. And so look for that information too, because that's a visible way to go to a protest or whatever you're going to and have people learn about us, which helps us grow, which feeds all of this and makes our vision easier to attain. So you guys are the ones that make this all work. Thank you for all the effort everybody put in, and for the great stewardship. Not only the committee, but also the graphics are so wonderful that it's really a helpful thing. So thank you. If there aren't any more questions, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.